I wouldn't give my mom my inheritance, so she set up a family meeting. When I got there, lawyers were waiting to force me to sign it over. But when they handed me the papers, I just smiled and said, "What a coincidence. I brought someone too." My name is Sarah, and at 37, I thought I'd learned to navigate my family's dysfunction. Growing up in suburban Ohio, I was the forgotten middle child between my mom Linda's golden boys. When my dad died in a car accident when I was 12, everything changed overnight. Linda remarried within 18 months to Bob, a decent enough guy who managed a Home Depot. But Bob came with his own son, Jake, who was 8 and became the center of their universe. I became the extra kid, the reminder of Linda's first marriage, tolerated but never truly wanted. Through high school, I was invisible unless they needed something. While Jake got new Nikes and Xbox games, I worked at Dairy Queen to buy my own clothes. In college, I waited tables at Applebee's and sent money home whenever Linda called crying about Jake's latest screw-up, dropping out of community college, crashing Bob's Ford F-150, getting arrested for underage drinking. I thought if I kept being the good daughter, maybe they'd finally see me. That day never came. When Grandpa Joe passed last spring, everything shifted. He was my dad's father, a retired steelworker from Pittsburgh who'd kept in touch despite Linda's subtle discouragement. At the reading of his will at Henderson Associates law firm, I discovered he'd left me everything: his modest ranch house in Akron, his Ford stock, savings bonds, and a checking account. Nearly $850,000 total. The lawyer handed me a sealed letter. Through tears, I read Grandpa Joe's words: "Sarah, honey, I know your mom and Bob will never give you what you deserve. This is your chance to build the life you've always dreamed of." When I told Linda about the inheritance over dinner at Olive Garden, her entire demeanor changed. Suddenly she was sweet, asking if I needed help managing such a large sum. I politely declined. That's when the real Linda emerged. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning of a battle that would change everything. The guilt trips started immediately. How could I hoard money when Jake was trying to start his lawn care business? Didn't I care that Bob's back injury had him on disability? Family comes first, Sarah. Blood is thicker than water. Then came the phone calls. Linda would call at midnight, sobbing about their mortgage being underwater, their Chevy breaking down, Jake's girlfriend threatening to leave him because he couldn't afford an engagement ring. Every conversation ended the same way: "You could help us, Sarah. You could fix everything." When gentle manipulation failed, she escalated. I started getting texts from Bob, passive-aggressive messages about family loyalty. Jake sent Facebook messages calling me selfish. Even my cousin Michelle, who I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, called asking why I was hoarding Grandpa's money when everyone's struggling. The breaking point came during a tense dinner at Cracker Barrel. Linda sat across from me, pushing her meatloaf around her plate, and said very calmly, "I think it would be best if you transferred that money into a family trust. I could manage it properly." I actually laughed. "Mom, are you serious?" Her face hardened. "Dead serious. That money belongs to this family, not just you." I went no contact for 3 weeks. I met with my lawyer, Patricia Wells, and my financial advisor at Edward Jones. We moved everything to a secure credit union, changed all my passwords, and made sure Grandpa Joe's house deed was legally bulletproof. I thought that would be the end of it. Then I got the group text: "Family meeting Sunday at 2 p.m. Bob's office. Time to work this out like adults." "Mom." Against every instinct, I agreed to go. I figured I'd show up, say my piece, and leave for good. I had no idea I was walking into an ambush that would make my family's previous behavior look like child's play. Bob's insurance office was in a strip mall between a Pizza Hut and a nail salon. I should have known something was wrong when I saw the extra cars in the parking lot, but I assumed maybe other family members had shown up. I walked in wearing jeans and a simple blouse, ready to have it out once and for all. The reception area led to a conference room with a long wooden table. Linda, Bob, and Jake sat on one side, all dressed up like they were going to church. On the other side sat 2 men in expensive suits I'd never seen before. My stomach dropped. "What's going on?" Linda stood up with that sickly sweet smile she used when she wanted something. "Sarah, sweetheart, we're just here to talk. These attorneys are here to help guide the process. What process? I stayed standing, every nerve on high alert. That's when they slid a manila folder across the table. Inside was a legal document stating that I would transfer 80% of my inheritance to a Miller family trust, controlled by Linda and Bob. They'd graciously allow me to keep 20%, doled out monthly like an allowance. The justification, to ensure responsible financial management and prevent reckless spending. Jake leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking like Christmas morning. Bob nodded gravely like this was all very reasonable. Linda watched me with hungry eyes. I didn't say a word. I didn't even sit down. I just looked around at their expectant faces, these people who had treated me like a burden my entire life, now trying to legally steal from me. Then I smiled. Funny, I said, reaching for my phone. I brought someone too. The door opened behind me, and their expressions changed from confident to terrified in about 2 seconds flat. Patricia Wells walked in like she owned the place. 60 years old, silver-haired, wearing a navy suit that cost more than Jake's car. She carried a thick leather briefcase and had the kind of presence that made everyone sit up straighter. Hi everyone, I said cheerfully. This is my attorney, Patricia. The color drained from Linda's face. Bob started fidgeting with his tie. Jake's smirk vanished completely. Patricia walked to the head of the table like she was chairing a board meeting. Before any discussion proceeds, she said in a voice that could cut glass, my client has asked me to review whatever documents are being presented and assess whether any undue coercion is taking place. Because from what I can see, this entire gathering appears highly questionable, both legally and ethically. One of their lawyers tried to speak up, but Patricia held up a hand. She opened her briefcase and pulled out copies of Grandpa Joe's will, bank statements, transfer documents, and medical records proving he'd been mentally competent when he'd updated his will twice in the past 2 years. This inheritance, Patricia continued, laying out documents like playing cards, is the sole property of my client. The deceased made his intentions crystal clear. Any attempt to transfer these assets under pressure or manipulation could constitute financial elder abuse, fraud, and extortion. And rest assured, we will press criminal charges if necessary. Dead silence. You could hear the Pizza Hut delivery truck rumbling outside. Linda tried to salvage the situation. Sarah doesn't understand what she's doing. We're just trying to help her manage things responsibly. I stood up. My whole life, I'd been the peacekeeper, the one who swallowed her words to avoid conflict. Not anymore. You've treated me like an outsider my entire life, I said, looking straight at Linda. You never protected me, never supported me, and now you want to steal from me too. That money isn't yours. It never was. I walked out without looking back. But if I thought that was the end of it, I was dead wrong. They were just getting started. Within 24 hours, the harassment began in earnest. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Emails disguised as legal notices filled my inbox. Jake's texts escalated from guilt trips to open threats. You think you're untouchable now? That money belongs to the family. Grandpa was losing his mind, everyone knows it. If you don't fix this, you'll regret it. I forwarded everything to Patricia. The attempted cyber attack came next. I got an alert that someone had tried to access my online banking from an IP address that traced back to Bob's office. They were desperate, sloppy, and stupid. Patricia acted fast. We filed cease and desist orders against all 3 of them. Any further harassment would result in restraining orders and criminal charges. The bank launched a fraud investigation. For a few days, it was quiet. I thought maybe they'd finally gotten the message. Then I came home from Target to find Bob's pickup truck parked across from my apartment complex. No one got out. No one knocked. It just sat there for 2 hours like a threat. I called the police, filed a report, forwarded everything to Patricia. She advised me to get a security system. I did her one better. I bought a German Shepherd named Max from a local breeder. Sweetest dog in the world until he sensed danger. Then he became something else entirely. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. The security camera showed Linda standing alone on my doorstep, looking older and tired but not sorry. Never sorry. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Sarah, she said, I know things got out of hand. We were just scared. Jake's business is failing, Bob can't work anymore. We thought maybe if we could just talk, you'd see we're not the enemy. The enemy, that word hit me like a slap. She kept talking, but I realized this wasn't an apology, it was one last manipulation. And I was done being manipulated. Linda stood on my doorstep spinning her sob story about how hard things had been, how I didn't understand what it meant to be part of a real family, how Grandpa Joe had made a mistake leaving everything to me. Then came the kicker, you don't deserve all of it, Sarah. You're just one person. Jake's got a wife and baby to think about. Bob and I are drowning in debt. We thought you loved us enough to share. For 37 years, I'd been trained to absorb the guilt, to sacrifice my needs for their wants, to apologize for taking up space. The old Sarah would have cried, would have begged for peace, might have even written him a check just to make it stop. But that woman was gone. I took a deep breath and said something I'd never said to her before. Not in anger, not in tears, just firm and unshakable. No, Mom, you don't get to guilt me anymore. You don't get to play victim when all you've done is manipulate, steal, and lie. You abandoned me emotionally years ago. Grandpa Joe saw it, that's why he left everything to me. And whether you like it or not, I'm done being your scapegoat. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Maybe she didn't. I shut the door. The next morning brought one final assault, a letter from Davidson Associates law firm claiming Grandpa Joe had been mentally incompetent when he wrote his will. They were actually trying to sue me. I laughed out loud. Patricia had anticipated this. Within hours, she fired back a 20-page rebuttal complete with medical records, witness statements, and security footage from the bank showing Grandpa Joe's clear mental state during both will updates. We counter-threatened with lawsuits for emotional distress, attempted fraud, and defamation. That's when it stopped. Completely. No more texts. No more drive BYS. No more legal threats. It was like they'd finally realized the truth, they had lost. But the real victory wasn't about money. It was about something far more valuable that I was just beginning to understand. The silence was deafening at first. After months of constant harassment, the quiet felt almost suspicious. But as weeks passed, I realized it was really over. They'd finally accepted defeat. The damage had been done, though. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Amanda Richardson, who helped me process 37 years of gaslighting, emotional abuse, and misplaced loyalty. I finally let myself grieve, not just for Grandpa Joe, but for the childhood I never really had, for the love I'd spent decades trying to earn but was never freely given. I grieved the fantasy of family I'd clung to for too long. Then I started to rebuild. I moved into Grandpa Joe's house full-time and renovated it top to bottom. I planted a vegetable garden and learned to make his famous chili recipe. I hosted dinner parties with friends who felt more like family than my blood relatives ever had. I donated $50,000 to Big Brothers Big Sisters, supporting kids aging out of toxic homes. I started my own freelance graphic design business, something I dreamed about for years but never believed I could do. 6 months later, my cousin Michelle called with family gossip. Bob had to sell his truck and take a job at Walmart. Jake's lawn care business folded, and his wife left him. Linda was renting out rooms in their house to make ends meet. They were still telling anyone who'd listen that I'd stolen what was rightfully theirs, that I was greedy and heartless. But I'd made peace with it. Because the truth was, I hadn't just inherited money. I'd inherited something far more valuable, freedom. The freedom to choose my peace over their chaos. The freedom to say no. The freedom to walk away and never look back. And that, more than anything else, was what they'd never forgive me for. But I was finally okay with being unforgiven. I was finally okay with being free.